Hello, my loves. We need to review for the chapter 15-16 test. And the way that vocab quizzes are going right now, look at my cute little Santa hat. We really need to make sure that we're prepared for this. So I'm filming this on Wednesday with my crazy little Santa hat, right? You have until Monday to watch this as many times as humanly possible. So you can be successful, because that's why I'm doing this. I'm taking all this time. I want y'all to be successful. So remember, watch it once, pause it as we go through, write down the questions, go into the PowerPoints to find your answers. Do that all on your lonesome. Like, that needs to be your learning organic experience, because this should be the third or the fourth time that we're discussing this material, right? You're not only getting things from my lectures and quizzes, right? You're doing your key terms, you're doing supplement, like the Edpuzzle videos you had to do for chapter 15, all that jazz, right? You're doing those things. I know you are, right? You're brilliant kids. Okay. Then you're going to hook up with a study buddy. I don't care if you FaceTime, compare your notes, compare what answers you have. Well, I got this. Okay. Well, I'm going to put both down just to cover my bases. Then you're going to put yourself in some sort of a testing scenario. Make a Quizlet with your questions and your answers the way that you want to do it, or ask mom and dad to like ask you things. Like, you need to have that like 3-point exposure. I feel like I'm using my hands a lot. Okay. So I have my test pulled up right here. I'm going to go through like I always do. Are we ready? We ready? Okay. Question number 1. So we're starting with Freedmen's Bureau. It's really like a key termy question. If you know the key term, which I think everyone got that right on the quiz. My quiz averages were really bad for chapter 15. So we really need to make sure we know our key terms. I think it was because of Thanksgiving. So I'm going to go ahead and say that. I don't think it's because of y'all, because y'all are brilliant, but I think the break kind of made things start. So know the definition of Freedmen's Bureau and you'll totally get it right. Okay. Sharecropping, right? We put it on this, like, remember that looks so bad, but it's brilliant. Remember when we had the chapter 15 response, on what day did we do that? Where you guys had to write policy/event, and then you had to write the response. We wrote it down there. It's in the PowerPoint. Make sure we understand like why it was so bad. Remember, they're getting trapped in this cycle of debt, but like, what's trapping them? Remember, they're being forced to work for their former slave owners. Can we trust them to do the things necessary? And then the depression hits. Like, just make sure you know sharecropping and what's really going on to like make things more difficult for them. Okay. You have a question about the resettlement of former slaves in the South once they're freedmen, but I really want you to focus on the restoration plan that we wrote here, Johnson's restoration plan, right? It's in the PowerPoint. And the things that he had to do, we put it on this. This is so important for the test. Super important. All right, I got to roll. What happened immediately after the Civil Rights Act of 1866? We've got back and forth and back and forth and back and forth going on, right? You've got this happening, Johnson saying no, Congress overriding, then this happening, Johnson saying no, Congress overriding, and then, Congress gets a new technique, and that's what that question is about, that new technique, which is amending the Constitution. I just basically gave you the answer to that. Don't get that wrong. I want to know about the impeachment of Andrew Johnson. I want to know how the South reacted after they were forced to amend the 13th Amendment, which is on this. What was the goal of the KKK under General Nathan Bedford Forrest? Like, what was his goal? It's in the PowerPoint. Because it's not as like crazy as it's crazy because it's the KKK, but just kind of look out for that. I want to know his goal. It's in the PowerPoint. Nathan Bedford Forrest. I want to know what the 15th Amendment did to the women's rights movement. 2 responses. It's on this. And it's on the PowerPoint, but it's really on this too. One of the things we wrote down towards the end is some of the good things. There was like 3 good things we wrote down at the bottom of your chart. Know all 3 of those good things. One of them is going to be on the test. 2 lies. 2 are going to be on the test too. You have to know, go to the slide with the Compromise of 1877. It's the last slide in chapter 15, and I have things numbered. You have to know all those things, because the question is, which of the following statements describes the election of 1876? And like, you have to know. And I wrote this like all by my lonesome. So don't copy and paste it and try to think that you're going to find the answer, because you're not, because I wrote it. You have to know every aspect of it. You have to know the story, everything that's white at the bottom and like it's highlighted. It's like the end of Reconstruction, like all of that. Know it like the back of your hand. Memorize it. All right, moving on to chapter 16. Now, here's the thing. We haven't really lectured over chapter 16. So I'm just going to pull in the points. And as I lecture, I'm going to, in class, I'm really going to kind of reiterate this stuff. I want to know the guy that predicted everything. He was on, did I put him on your quiz? No, I don't think I put him on your quiz. But there's a Secretary of State that predicted all of these things were going to happen. He's on your test. It's a really easy question. Just know who that guy is. I want to know the big vision of the Republicans. And we kind of covered this already on Tuesday. They had a big vision. It was an economic vision. And one of the first things they had to do in order to serve their economic vision was to build and subsidize this one thing. So make sure you know what that is. You have a question about the Burlingame Treaty. It's super key termy. It's a key term question. Know what the 1868 Burlingame Treaty is. And that's why I put it on your quiz. I want to know what we got from the Burlingame Treaty, as well as why it was encouraged. You have a question about the gold standard. Make sure you know the gold standard, and it's on the PowerPoint slide, why we changed to it and why it was so great. I want to know what's the difference of plains farming before and after the 1880s. Like, what's going on in the Great Plains prior to that, and then how is this new economy changing the Great Plains? And we're going to talk about it more on Thursday. I want to know what the post-Civil War cattle boom was. Post-Civil War cattle boom. What is that? I want to know what life for women was like in the Great Plains. We'll talk about that on Thursday. I want to know why farming on the Great Plains was bigger than in the East, like in the Midwest, actually. Ooh, the Wildlife Protection Bill. You have a question on that. It's right from the PowerPoint. You could like get it now if you wanted to. The Wildlife Protection Bill. Make sure you know that. It's so big. Especially with the American Indians. That's why it's such a big deal. And it's so sad, y'all. It makes me want to cry. I want to know why we defined small preserves of uninhabited wilderness in the 60s and 70s. Basically, it's like the reservation system. Like, what's our goal with the reservation system when it comes to American Indians? That might be something I cover on Friday. I want to know how assimilation is being used in chapter 16. Like, what's the new technique? Because we talked about it with Mr. Knox, the Secretary of War during Washington's presidency, and we knew assimilation wasn't being effective, but we're going to try a new strategy. It's not going to work either, but you have a question about that strategy. Make sure you understand for about 3 or 4 questions, we will never keep our promises. The government will never keep their promises, and it's really sad. But American Indians will always have promises that were not kept to them. And we're even going to have a Supreme Court case that says we don't even have to honor anything we've ever said to them. It's awful. So awful. Lone Wolf Hitchcock. You have a Dawes Act question from 1887. Make sure you know that. You have, oh, you have 2. You have 2 questions on Dawes. Dawes is really big. You have to know what happens after the Battle of Little Bighorn. Oh gosh, and you have to know the Battle of Wounded Knee. So you have Battle of Little Bighorn, Battle of Wounded Knee. You're going to be reading a passage associated with Reconstruction and the KKK. I was planning on doing stations so you could see this passage, but most likely we'll read the passage in class so you can see it. But understanding the response that the KKK is in an environment, right, where they don't like radicalism. They think it's too radical, and they blame that environment to the construction of the KKK, which there's no excuse. The KKK will never have an excuse, but they're going to blame, this is their point of view, right, objectively, or subjectively, the environment as to why the KKK came to power. And there's a question about reconciliation, like this whole idea of how are radical Republicans going to change the minds of slave owners in the South? Like, how are they really going to do that? Can they? I don't really know. Like, you've got a whole entire society built on the backs of somebody else, and overnight you're expecting them to not be racist anymore. It's wrong. It shouldn't have happened. But the radical Republicans' expectations and lack of enforcement is going to prove, Reconstruction to be a failure. Okay, and then you have a question, another passage, and this passage is specifically it's coming from David Wallace Adams. We should read it in class on Friday, and I'll make sure you guys read it. But it's another technique on how we're trying to assimilate. So I'm going to be using that word a lot in section 3. Okay, that's the test. It's only 32 questions. So here's the thing: there's not a lot of room for error here for you to not do well. There's no key terms here. You're going to have to read. You're going to have to prepare. Test is Monday. You have 5 days with this video. 5 days. We are not waiting until Sunday night to get this done. You're going to follow your normal routine as if we were going to test on Friday, and then you're going to leave it alone, and then you're going to come back to it, and then you're going to leave it alone, and you're going to come back to it. You have 5 days to be successful. Okay, so this is the last test summative going into the grade book. We'll have our essay boot camp starting on next Tuesday, and that will be the final summative. So study, prepare, do well.